G'day, welcome to the Financial Bloke Podcast, the podcast for people seeking the wisdom needed to grow their family's wealth and live a happier, healthier and more prosperous life. My name's Ben Law and I am the Financial Bloke. Over the years, I've seen plenty of rural producers develop what I call farmish type businesses, which is a kind of extension to the rural production business. Now, the most common example I'd say would be working off farm, say in the mines or, doing some off farm work. Maybe you're a professional in a previous life and you do that contracting. The other side could be machinery contracting, such as, I've got cotton pickers, headers, trucks, earth moving equipment, which I contract off farm and maybe build a business out of that. But another one, which is less common, but still just as viable, is tourism. Now, more often than not, this is done when there's a cash flow need, like rising interest rates, heavy debt loads, there might be scale issues or things like droughts. And it's generally just to provide a supplemental income to prop up or support the farming business. Now, some other examples might be to diversify and reduce risk. It could be smoothing out cash flow. It could be used to reduce debt. It could be drought mitigation, preparing for the next drought. It could be something like succession, where you've got multiple children wanting to come back into the farming business, or maybe even one and there's not enough scale, so you want to then be able to have an alternative source of income to bring them in. But even it could be as simple as funding kids' school fees. I mean, it's expensive to send kids off farm off to boarding school, and I've seen a number of families actually use those businesses to be able to fund those school fees. Now, today we're going to be focusing on tourism. However, I want to be really clear that the lessons and principles often applied to supplemental or farmish businesses apply right across the board. Now, our guest today is Susan Lee. Susan's the principal consultant at Clear Vision Consulting, which is her own personal company. She works generally with not-for-profits, industry and government organisations to build competitive strategies for those in the tourism space. Susan's really passionate about tourism, especially in the regional areas. She's a serving non-executive director on the Western Melbourne Tourism Board, and previously she held board roles on the Australian Regional Tourism Network. And she's currently writing a new book which caught my eye, and it's on how to start, market and build a successful regional tourism business. So for anyone on the land that's thinking about starting up a farmish business in the tourism space, this will be right up your alley. So without further delay, welcome Susan.
Hi Ben, how you going?
Fantastic. Well, this is take number 2. So we tried to have a go at recording this a couple of days ago and the internet let us down. So I'm eternally optimistic right now that we'll get it done, won't we?
Love it. Absolutely. Yep. Stay positive. It's good.
Now, Susan, you've got a really strong history with tourism and that's your space, and especially in the, dealing with agricultural producers, shall we say, in remote and regional areas of at least Central Australia. Now, before we get cracking, can you give us a bit of a summary on your background? And also, you've got a book coming out, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but why a book? So your background and why did you think a book was a good idea?
Background and book. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity. My background in tourism goes a long way back. I work in all sectors, but tourism is definitely the sector that just for me, I'm interested in people and places and culture and, what makes us the way that we are. I'm really interested in essentially and fundamentally that's kind of what I'm interested in. And after I did a writing degree at uni, I was doing journalism and communications and working in the media space a bit. I did a student exchange across to the United States, upstate New York, and I was learning about radio and TV and writing for news radio and, all that kind of stuff. So that probably answers, the second part of your question. But that experience being overseas, I was also working in Europe as a flotilla host, some boats in Greece. So my boyfriend at the time and I, we looked after, millions of pounds worth of yachts and all of the, the guests that would come on to the yachts and all of the things that happened to families on boats and in harbours. It was just fascinating and interesting. And as well as, we're in Greece, remote Greece, beautiful. And I did that for a ski season and a sailing season, which a lot of Aussies do that after uni. A lot of English people do it as well. And I got back to Australia and, when I was working overseas, I was asked a lot of questions about Australia, about our relationship to Aboriginal people, about the bush, and I just didn't know how to answer a lot of those questions. I just wasn't equipped, but it sort of planted seeds of curiosity. And when I got back to Australia and I was paying off my holiday debt and my working holiday debt and trying to get a job and, living at mum's as a, 25-year-old. And, at that time that was pretty tough for me. I'd been out of home for a good few years by then. I decided I would go to Central Australia and become a tour guide. I got accepted into their tour guide training program for a company called Adventure Tours at the time. That was just the beginning of a complete life-changing experience. I learned about the outback. I didn't tour guide for very long. I moved pretty quickly into a job where I was working more with industry in the Northern Territory Tourism Commission. And at that time, it was just sort of 2002, 2004, we were hot off the heels. The bush was hot off the heels of, I don't know if you remember, the big celebrations about the outback. It was like the year of the outback, I think it was, in 2000. And it was around the same time as the Sydney Olympics. And, people were very optimistic and money was flowing and everyone was in love with the outback. And I fell in love with the outback. Like, it was just the way that the country worked and the plants and the animals and the stories and the diversity of people and cultures, including the tourists and the visitors. I just loved it. I was so interested in all of it. It was so different to sort of living in Adelaide. So I stayed there for a few years, but that was sort of the beginning of looking at tourism destinations, looking at places as destinations and seeing how some of the station owners around Alice Springs were diversifying into tourism, with like, at the time it was just B&Bs. There's no Airbnbs then. And how the internet was just beginning to impact how people reached new audiences, especially export markets overseas, the programs that the government was offering, and just some of the models and the frameworks. I think we were the only team at the time, 23 years ago, we were the only team who were working on what's called destination development, which is sort of like how you sustainably develop a tourism destination in places that have got few resources, that are quite sort of culturally, ecologically sensitive and also remote. So how do you do that in a smart and better way to attract tourism, manage tourism impacts, and also help people to make money, to sustain products, tours, accommodation, that kind of thing. So that was really the heartland of what I still do today. All that learning I brought along with me. And then the following sort of last 10 years, I've really been working in business. I did an MBA, did my master's, and I worked in Outback South Australia for about, a couple of years in the Flinders Ranges and Outback. I was a regional marketing manager for the Tourism Commission. So there, I actually found it really difficult to be a regional tourism manager. I think regional tourism managers get absolutely flogged because, they're like it's the oil in the water. You've got industry wanting one thing, business owners needing one thing and the government sort of doing another, and the RTM, the managers, sitting in the middle trying to please everybody. So you get stretched really thin, and I had a lot of questions about that, and I began to see how difficult it was for regional people to get the help they needed. And when I left that role, I did my MBA and I learned about business, and I had a lot of aha moments. It was like, I wasn't going crazy. That was really a problem. And then I went into consulting for the last sort of 12 years in my own business, Clear Vision Consulting, and working a lot in this sort of space with industry, not-for-profit, strategic planning, and a lot with Indigenous economic development, and a lot of it with a tourism focus. Not all of it, but a lot of it. That's sort of my passion area, I suppose, and that's why the book. So I thought, for a lot of reasons, I wrote the book. One of the reasons was, I suppose, I've always wanted to write a book, at that level. I think as a writer, if you love words come easy to me. I love to write, and I've been doing this stuff, so much I could sort of do it in my sleep. And it was a real relief putting it on paper, I've got to say. It's like, now it's here. I can actually see it, and there's a structure to it. And for anyone who needs structure to learn, I think a book is a great format. But also on a really practical level, regional people are busy. So if you're driving around, you can listen to it as an audio book, or you could pick it up, when you've got 5 minutes in between, all the jobs you've got to do. I remember how long it took me to understand the industry, and it's big, it's complex. I just wish I had someone to make it simple. When I first started, it took me years to wrap my head around it. So the book sort of explains it from the inside out. So the structures and the frameworks and the language, and it's really to help people who are time poor, and a long way from a city, and a long way from, government tourism people who often do the networking and the training. If you're a long way away, you don't ever sort of get to learn. So it's to sort of fast track people's learning so they can sort of get on with giving things a go and making money sooner and, sharing what they've got.
Today's episode is brought to you by AgriCoach. You've worked bloody hard over the years and you've built a solid operation. But as your children grow up and start their own journeys, you're beginning to think about the next 5, 10, and even 15 years and how to keep driving the business forward and ensure a smooth and successful succession plan. Preparing the business, preparing the next generation, and preparing for your eventual retirement all requires a solid plan and a proven process. Unsure about the right steps to take? Head on over to agricoach.com.au/webinar to learn more about our Succession Proof Your Family webinar. AgriCoach, aligning families, growing wealth, and protecting legacies. And now, let's get back to the episode. That's interesting, isn't it? Because I find it interesting you said that you find the words really easy. I find words really easy, but putting them on paper I find very difficult. Pictures are more my thing, and I think that's from being very good at finger painting when I was in kindergarten, maybe.
Pictures are great. Pictures say 1,000 words, don't they?
They do. Yeah. Now, Susan, what I'd like to get to is get to the crux of this, which is what I talked about in the introduction about the fact that a lot of farming families use off-farm-ish businesses, so contracting businesses, etc., which I won't go into again. But one of those is people are looking at tourism. They're saying we've got this great asset, we want to diversify our income, for various reasons. So do you see that tourism is a bloody good opportunity for people on the land? And also, if you do, has something changed relatively recently to make that more viable, or has it always just been a great opportunity?
It's a good question. Like a lot of good questions, there are a wide range of answers to that. So my head firstly, I think, yes, there are opportunities, but it sort of depends where you are and how you manage them and what resources you've got, like anything. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew, but you also don't want to think too small in tourism. That's
for obvious reasons. Like if you've got a big business, you don't want to be distracted from your core businesses, which is the business of farming, but you also want to invest an appropriate amount of time and resources into it to make it a viable operation. Otherwise, you're just wasting your effort, aren't you?
Well, that's right. And also, tourists, they can be really annoying. They wander off in the paddocks, they go where they're not supposed to go. If you don't design your accommodation and your site well, you can get into trouble around safety. You really have to manage the impacts of tourism, not just the people and the customer service side, because it is a customer service industry. So you'll need someone to meet and greet, generally if you're sort of doing an on-farm experience. Not always, but I'm thinking of in South Australia, which is the patch I know pretty well. We've got places like Skytrek, Willow Springs, which is a very well-known four-wheel drive trail on the Willow Springs station in the Flinders Ranges, and there's a whole number of them. Rawnsley Park's another one, and both of these stations are working sheep stations, and they've diversified into tourism. And I think one of them now is, I think Rawnsley Park is majority tourism, not even sheep station anymore. I could be wrong, but at least they have a reception where people are met and greeted and then steered to where you have to go. So you sort of need to design and manage your site as a practical consideration. But I guess just stepping back more from the practical stuff, I think increasingly, especially highlighted since COVID, but I think increasingly people are interested about, where our food comes from, what farmers are doing, the piece that farmers are doing around environmental sustainability, particularly, for younger markets and city-based people who are educated but, not connected to country life or regional life, and there's a lot of them. I think since COVID, we still are experiencing like a COVID long tail. So there's still sort of anxiety around travel. The supply chains in our sector have been disrupted. Your listeners will know that flights are still pretty expensive. People are still preferring to jump in a car and travel. So car travel is becoming, more attractive, for better or for worse. But people want to then go and explore regions and are looking for things to see and do close to where they live, or, within a few hours drive, or if they're long hauling with their caravans and things, people are working more on the road. Our flexible working arrangements have kind of created more interest and opportunity for people to travel and work from anywhere. So we're seeing a lot more travel being taken by people in the business sector. We're seeing a lot younger families traveling by van. It's an affordable family holiday because they're not jumping in a plane and going to Bali or to the States. And then as you sort of look out, as you sort of get further and further up in your helicopter and you look at the environment, it's like when you look globally at what's going on, I mean, America sounds like a pretty scary place. Now, I'm sure that's perception, but similarly, that's what's happening. People are looking at Australia and we're looking like we've come out pretty well from COVID, and we've come out pretty well from various economic crises. And, even though when you look closer, of course, there's complexity and people would argue with that. We're pretty attractive as a country. A lot of land, a lot of space, not very many people. On one level, the branding of Tourism Australia is kind of working. But geopolitically, we're looking pretty healthy and strong. So people want to come and have a piece of that. They want to experience that, especially our lifestyle, our culture, the country. And of course, that presents opportunities for farm-based businesses to experiment in tourism for sure. Yeah, I think that's pretty big. And then the other part of that is, of course, the growing middle classes in Asia and Africa and the Middle East. More people are becoming more wealthy and being lifted out of poverty. And as that happens, they also want to travel and experience the world and have a look at other cultures and increase their education. So I think increasingly in Australia, our markets are going to become more diverse, less blonde hair and blue-eyed, I think. So I think the other part of this, if people are thinking about diversifying into tourism, is to really to look at sort of whether that's an interesting, attracting international markets is of interest and who they are, because they might not be anything like Australians or our culture, Anglo culture, I suppose, in Australia, or like farm-based culture. So that presents a fantastic opportunity for people to really showcase simply who we are, how people live on the land, what the issues are. That is, I think, just being yourself and being yourself to a completely different market. That's the opportunity. As simple as that sounds, it kind of is that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if I think about it, Susan, the way I look at it is, a lot of businesses maybe don't have the scale they need. So they've got multiple children coming through. They need some scale. They want to look at their business opportunities there to diversify away from just pure agriculture. And it's a really good opportunity. And if I look around the people I know that are in the city, there seems to be people are traveling overseas less because it is exorbitantly expensive to do this now. And I think people are looking for an adventure and they're looking for something completely different. They're living their everyday lives in the city or in the big regional centres. Life's, I wouldn't say boring's the right word, but there's no adventure. And so they're looking for this complete culture change for them. Now, if you're living on the land, you probably think, oh, well, this isn't a different culture, but it is. It's more dangerous. It's more exciting. It's more peaceful. It's, there's a whole lot of biodiversity that people in the city, really value, that you go, oh, we've got some platypus out the back and a couple of kangaroos down there and some emus. They've been there all the time, but people value those. And so I see it and I go, okay, well, there's an opportunity here for you to tap into that market, and also to, like you said, the fly drive. Like, so many people now are getting caravans and going adventuring, and they want somewhere to stay. They don't just necessarily, and again, caravanning and driving is only one section of the whole tourism market, but people don't want to just drive to, let's say, Mount Isa and stay in the motel in Mount Isa. They want to get out and experience the real world, and so they love that, being part of the agricultural space. Yeah. And I think also as an industry, there is a massive city-country divide building over time. And I think that that's a great way of people starting to reconnect. Yeah. So, Susan, if someone's starting to think and go, look, I've been considering this whole tourism thing in various forms, what are the common mistakes you'd say? Let's just say the common 3 mistakes, if you can think of 3 off your head, and more if there's more. But when they start off, so let's just say for starting off, so you're going to do it, you're thinking about doing something. Mm-hmm. What's the first up mistakes they make?
Oh, this is great. I love this stuff. I actually have a whole chapter of this in my book.
We don't want to use all the book up, so just give us a couple then.
I guess I call them myths, or common myths of the industry. I guess the first one that comes to mind is that, and maybe people do it as a way to make themselves feel comfortable, is they think small. They might be thinking like, oh, well, it's okay. It's just a bit of fun. Which kind of the problem with that is, yes, it should be fun. Everything you do in tourism should be fun. But of course, you need to work at it and measure the right things. But I think by not really thinking about what's fun for your guests and visitors and not setting things up properly and not sort of thinking through what's actually going to work on your farm or in your business and with your staff and your family, and really thinking the design, as I mentioned before, and how you're going to market it, who's going to be responsible. You've got to do a lot of thinking through, like any business planning process, if you're going to, be adding another venture to your core work. So that's one, just not taking it too seriously early enough and not really committing to it, which means that it can sort of flop. And also you send, mixed signals to markets and you don't really ever get the success because people are like, oh, I think they're open. Maybe they're not. Oh, no, they're not open. Oh, it's a bit ad hoc. Oh, well, we'll just go somewhere else because we're not too sure. So it destroys your marketing.
Tourists want certainty, don't they? They go somewhere, they're going to book to travel all that way. They want to know they've got some sort of certainty.
Yeah. And also there's lots of competition. It's a highly competitive industry. So there's lots of people doing things at the small level. But if you can actually think things through early and do things well early, you can sort of get out of that sort of beginner mindset and into sort of more of what I call an operator, not a hobbyist. So take yourself seriously, become an operator, do things for profit and make sure you're enjoying it. And, you sort of hit that sweet spot of not investing in the wrong things early. And I guess that's another mistake. People like to invest in stuff that is niche for them, not for their market. So you might have a fantastic interior design flair and you might spend, I don't know, $10,000 on doing up your shearer's hut or something. And in fact, what people want is the rustic, vibe. A couple of throw cushions and a nice rug and some new sheets is all you needed to spend, $400, and yet you've gone out to town and you've got the best light fittings, and people don't want what they can get in the city. They want what you can offer them. They want comfort, sure, but they also want unique, original, different, bespoke. They want your story, of your country, your station, your land, your family, your history. That's what they're coming for. So don't overinvest too early. And I guess just the third thing I'd say, as I see a lot of, is people go and get a beautiful brochure. Like the first thing they do is they say, I've got an ABN, I've got a tourism business, and here I've got my beautiful brochure here. They shove it in front of your face as a tourism person. I was like, oh, and I sort of, you sort of look at it and you think, oh, this is great, but then the logo's not right and the colours are wrong and the photos are a bit blurry and they've taken photographs of their big white four-wheel drive. So they're very, what we call in marketing, it's feature-based marketing, not benefit-based marketing. Mm-hmm. So people take photos of all the technical things because they think that's what people are travelling for, my beautiful four-wheel drive. Well, no, because your markets probably already have their own cars and what they're coming for is like I've been saying, they're coming for you, for your story, your country, to do the tracks on your place. They want to see themselves in the picture. It's an emotional thing. You've got to sell the sizzle, not the sausage. People know what sausages are, but we want to know what's different about your, the sizzle, the flavour. So getting that brochure early is not always necessary. And the other reason being is that a lot of people these days, well over 70% of travel booked is booked online with online travel agents, or OTAs, as we call them in the industry jargon. So people are not necessarily using brochures. It's not the 1980s. Brochures do have their place, but you might find that that's something that you do way down the track, maybe in year 4 or 5, if you have a need to have a brochure in a stand that's getting a lot of foot traffic, like a visitor information centre, for example. Brochures do work if you distribute through those channels, especially for the self-drive market, because they do go to VICs, some of them. But most people are still booking online, on their phones and using, online channels to book. So that's really where your marketing and your imagery probably needs to be in the first instance.
Because I like that. I think it's 2 things I wrote down as you were talking there, Susan. One was sell the benefits, not the features. And I think that's a really important point. And I think I would expect, or I would guess, that you'd need to spend a fair amount of time thinking about who your target avatar audience would be. So who are these people and what would they be looking for? Like, why are they coming to see you? And I would expect a great tip might happen to be is if you are already running a small tourism business that you're looking to scale and you've gone, wow, we've got some results here, I can see some opportunity, is then to be able to ask your customers and say, what is it you come here for? and then trying to either work out, is that the secret sauce that people will come for, and then advertise that and market to that and provide it, because what you enjoy may be not what other people enjoy. And as an example was what you said before about the creature comforts. You decide, I live on the farm, and all I want to do is go to the city and sit in an air-conditioned unit with nice views over the city and just do nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas, people coming out to your property might be stoked to be able to get up in the morning and just sit on the front veranda with the flies and
sleeping
go for a
under
wander down the cattle yards. Yeah,
people
have a
travel.
fire pit.
Yeah, that is right. Standing around a fire. Really simple things can make you money. This is another whole, again, chapter of my book. Can I really make money out of that? It's kind of crazy and quirky. And, people travel to escape their own lives. I really believe this. We travel, not all markets, but the leisure market, I think there's some sort of relief you get by getting on the road and getting out of your day to day. Something happens. Like I think, for a lot of so I run an Airbnb in the Flinders Ranges called the Outback Shack, and this is something that I've learned from becoming an operator and running it's an Airbnb. And most of my market, and it's sort of the way I've set it up, is I've targeted it as at a very independent market. I run it remotely. I have a great cleaner and a great person who comes and cuts rakes up the leaves and stuff and gets rid of the weeds. You set it up once and you sell it over and over again. Like anything, if you have capital, you want to, if you're on the farm, I presume it's the same. You want to be able to use that capital so it's not sitting there and taking up, your equity and your time and your money. So you set it up well. You refresh it every few years for accommodation, even if it's a tour. You might want to refresh it every couple of years. But you basically, once you've got the secret sauce, you don't muck around with it too much. And that's the beauty of tourism. Like that's a great passive income for a farming family, and that will get the school fees, cover those school fees. So, you don't want to overinvest, and you'd be really surprised at what people like. If you've got someone handy in your family or in your community who can build like a little reading nook or a little outside sleeping area with a beautiful mosquito net over it. It's very simple things that you can probably do with stuff that's lying around with very little effort, given everything else you're doing on farm, that people will pay, good money for.
And one of the things you just mentioned there about the school fees, again, I mentioned that in the beginning, but one of the families that I know set up a tourism business up in the far north of Queensland, and they managed to find out what I call a really strong why. It's a reason for doing that. And I think that's the first point anyone's thinking about an off-farm-ish business, so like tourism, is to think about what the hell is my why? Why am I doing this? And their why was because they needed to pay for school fees. And they said, we get droughts, we get floods, our income is inconsistent, and we've got 3 kids to put through boarding school. We're concerned that we might hit a corner where we can't afford to pay for those school fees, or it puts pressure on the business, or it stops us doing other things, various reasons. So they started the tourism business and did a great job, and it was to do this kids' school fees. And it became the most great enabler for the family, because they said, we want to invest all our time and effort in the farm, but it's also just as important to invest time in this off-farmish business, because it's actually something viable. And I think that why is really important. So I think that's good. The other one I've seen also too is the whole succession process. Not using tourism, I haven't seen examples in this, but I've seen them where, someone's come along and said, look, I've got 2 kids want to come back on the property. There's enough room for 1, or I've got 3 and there's enough room for 2. And they set up that off-farmish business, like a contracting or something like that, where that allows the other kids to come back or be involved in the family business to be able to scale. So it's find out your why from the start. And if it's a distraction, and this would be my thoughts, is if it's just a distraction because you're bored with life and go, it'd be nice to do a little tourism business on the side, you got to really think about, is that going to be a good enough why? Because if your why is not strong enough, when you hit the first road bump, you're going to give up. You need to be really tenacious. So I think that's a really good point you made there. So if someone's got a business also too, and they're wanting to scale that business, so that, let's just say they've done a little bit of tourism on the side and gone, hey, this could actually be a viable business. And you mentioned a few before there that were sheep stations that did a little bit of tourism, and now tourism's probably their number one earner. Where do you see people get to the point where they go, holy dooly, this could be a really positive add-on to our business?
Yeah. I think when you've hit a good occupancy point, so I think a couple of things happen. One, when you're getting busy and you've raised your prices and you're still busy, then you know that there's a demand. You've hit a good vein, you've tapped into a vein of demand. or a market, something's happening in the market where you're just on. And it depends on the destination. Like I know the Outback's a very underestimated, undervalued experience, in my view, across Australia. We talk about it in a romantic way in city-based marketing and even at a national level, but I'm a real advocate for the benefit. When you look at the figures, for example, in the Flinders Ranges and Outback, we get, around about 800,000 visitors a year and in a normal year, which is not as big as some other parts of Australia, but pretty big for a place.
It's a lot of people, Susan.
Yes, it's nearly 1 million people who are coming through. And that in South Australia, that's done with very minimal state-based or regional marketing. So these are people who are coming organically because they know the place, the operators have been marketing, they've done a lot of heavy lifting. It's a mature market and people are looking for that kind of experience. So it always makes me wonder what could be done. I'm a bit off topic, but what could be done if we actually did invest strongly in regional and outback tourism. But many of these places don't have enough people and population. So unfortunately, decisions kind of get made based on population base.
Where the votes are.
Yeah, that too, right? But your question was about how do people know if they're ready to scale, I think.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Susan. When you said that they're making some money out of it, they put their prices up so it becomes even more profitable. They're getting a decent return on it and they look at it and go, well, geez, I've got to do a lot of fencing out here every day to make that sort of money. Well, I could do it over here on the tourism business.
Yes, that's right. And also the other thing I'm really cognizant on that's just kicking around in the back of my mind is the mental health aspect for regional people. I used to I did a brief stint as a rural financial counsellor in some regions, just marginal farming areas, small family farms, and who don't do that well, as you might know, and many of your listeners might be aware of too. But tourism and farming have lots of parallels. I think one of your last podcasts was around 80% of the wealth in the top sort of 20% of the producers, and tourism's much the same. It's largely a small to medium enterprise family mum and dad market. In regional tourism, hundreds and hundreds of small businesses that don't scale. They tend to just stay at a certain level, and most people are not really earning maybe enough salary for one person. Maybe they're earning between $100,000 and $200,000 income. So their salary would probably be $60,000 after costs and, disbursements and then into profit. And most of them are they're not large companies. And when you look at, to back that up, when you look at the ASX 100, only a couple of companies in that top 100 in Australia are tourism companies. So we're not really represented that well in, that sort of large business sector. So I guess what we're talking about is really people who are in small businesses wondering how on earth they scale and when do they step off and take the risk and go the next level. And I think in many ways, if you're running a successful farm, I reckon mentally you're already thinking at scale if you're into cropping and, you understand economies of scale in farming if you're doing reasonably well, and you're a risk taker because you live season to season and you navigate the complexity of farming funding and banking and, relationships. So you've already got, I think, a lot of those very essential skills that you need in tourism. But the mental health aspect is tourism brings people to your region that might not be, normal for your community, which can be excellent for your community and bring your community, into the rest of the global world. That has lots of benefits for diversity and for stimulation and mental health for people, on farm and in your regional farming towns. It also brings workforce, which I know we're sadly missing at the moment, since COVID. But the whole thing about people working on farm, whether it's family or backpackers or people from cities who are having a tree change, is that it brings workforce and supports your region. I mean, there's so many benefits, aren't there? But I think that's also really important to consider.
I think that's a really important point. And it just triggered one in my mind too. It's the same old, we don't have enough work for maybe one worker to come on the farm, or maybe to get a second worker, or maybe a third. But if we had a tourism business, that would give us enough turnover, cash flow and work to be able to justify employing that person. It's almost like the cotton farmer that not doing enough country to justify buying $1 million cotton picker. But if they buy the cotton picker, do their own work and then go off and do some work for other people, people contracting, well, that makes the purchase viable. And so I could see a good case for that side of things, or even a child coming home. I've got a son or a daughter that desperately wants to come back to the farm, but we don't have enough scale. So why don't they come back? We start up a tourism type business and we can use that to grow the opportunity. So I think there's a whole lot of reasons for doing it. But I mean, listening to you today, I think if anyone said to me, what do you think I should do, Ben? And first thing I'd say is this is way out of my pay grade. But what seems common sense to me is you can't half-ass it. Like if you're going to do it, get your why, as I mentioned before, really strong, and then, put some resources into it. I'm not saying put lots of money resources, but put some grey matter into it. Think about it, strategize, work out what would work, talk to some other people. And that brings me to the book. And so I know when we talked about this, you've created this book, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll let you tell it a little bit more, but it's to basically take people that want to get into the tourism market. You're basically looking at saying, okay, well, how can I shortcut this for people so they don't have to spend the next 4 or 5 years researching on the internet, talking to tourism advisors, other people, and learning from the school of hard knocks. This is about shortcutting.
Yeah.
Have I got it close to correct?
Yeah, I think you have. And also, like any industry that has a strong marketing focus, which the tourism industry does, there's a lot of noise. And I just find it's helpful if you've got questions as a business owner and you're in the beginning, or a potential business owner, or even if you're just new to the sector and you might be working in a council or a regional body and be the economic development person, this book is also a great learning ground for just the terminology. It's its own planet, tourism it's got its own characteristics, terminology, language. It can be very alienating when you're looking from the outside looking in. So I wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And I'm a business writer, so I sort of cut to the chase. I've been trained as a journalist, so I kind of cut to the chase, but also, I bring a lot of case studies and some of my own humour. And, I do a lot of coaching for business owners. So a lot of it's about mindset and giving people the confidence and the feedback, the objective feedback, and saying, this is a strong product. What you're doing is excellent. You keep going. And it feels foreign, but keep going. You absolutely can do it. So I really want the book to be a coach, and a voice in readers' ear as they're considering it. Someone that you might just kick around an idea with, down at the pub or, in a coffee shop, and just back yourself in, because I do think the demand for regional tourism and experiences is high and growing. And the Tourism Australia research is showing that people really want to have, experiences around food, immersed in nature. They want to have experiences. It's not necessarily the whole 5-star thing has completely changed in Australia now. And the contemporary consumer the global consumer is no longer looking for chandeliers and gold-plated dining sets. They're looking for emotional engagement and experiences. Authentic is a word used a lot in the tourism industry. And the region's got that in spades. Many regions have got that in spades. But authentic what? You've got to be careful. It's got to still be, above board and pleasant and professional but friendly, how Australians are generally perceived. It's got to be on what we call on brand. So the book is really about that. How do you develop destinations? What are the factors in an experience? We talk about experiences. Well, how the hell do you make an experience? Well, there's a couple of models there that I walk people through. It's like how to market on a shoestring so you don't invest too early. So the key things that you really need to sort of get readers focused on, again, what makes a difference and what's important, and you can just hopefully push all the other noise. There's lots of noise about you need a social media plan and you need to do this and you need to do that, and are you going to export? And I mean, these things are probably, you'll hear a lot of it, and I just wanted to sort of put a hot knife through butter and sort of slice, just really make it kind of easier for people to navigate the noise from a business owner's perspective, from an operator perspective, and someone who has lived and worked in regions for a long time. I wanted to make that process easier for people.
It's interesting. I think people are time poor too. People just want to get to the point. They just want to say, okay, how do I do this? I don't want to spend years researching. So that's really, really valuable. And I know when I try and go on any new venture, I try and find someone that's done it before me or has the recipe for success. And I'm guessing in this case, there's a recipe in some way, shape or form. And you can have all the ingredients for a cake, but if you don't know which way to put them together and in which format, you're not going to get a cake, are you? So
that's That's true. I hadn't thought of it that way.
same.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of checklists. I think a red flag for me is when you see someone coming to you with a checklist on the tourism industry and saying, have you done these 10 things? I think checklists can help, but a business to me is essentially a creative exercise. And I think people take certainty in checklists and those sorts of things. But when you're talking about experiences, emotional engagement, you do need to have a business brain, but that's really, you need to understand kind of how those other things, those more, I guess, waffly things to some people maybe, how that works. And I love that space because to me, there is a way that all the pieces do fit together, but it does take a bit of imagination and it's really fun. Like once you hit it and I think it's, for many people, it's quite unbelievable that they can make money doing something that is actually pretty easy. And, I don't want to oversimplify it, but who doesn't love that?
Yeah, of course. And I think that's the challenge for people and why people that are very creative are drawn to tourism, because that's their creative side of the brain getting an outlet. And again, that just gives me another positive of this is that if you are in a farming operation, you may be looking for a creative outlet as well on top of it. So being able to do something like this, that's great. So Susan, we're starting to get to the end of our time now. So from your point of view, you've got this book coming out. I think it sounds like an awesome resource for anyone that's, number one, thinking about tourism. So saying, geez, should we consider this? It'd be a great research tool. But I think also anyone who's maybe given it a bit of a dabble and had a bit of a go at it and maybe not kick the goals they wanted to be able to come back, refresh and start from scratch and say, right, well, what do I need to adjust? Because I know it's not here yet. So, and we will put these details in the show notes for anyone that wants to hear, but how can people find you online and how can they get access to the book when it comes out?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have a website, so it's CV Consult. I'll give you all the details after this, but I have a website. People can go online and they can sign up to register for their interest in the book. And then I send out an email, not all the time, but just keeping people in the loop about, sneak peek for chapters, when the book's going to be launched, which I'm hoping will be around April, the title of the book. So sort of encouraging people to sort of get in touch through the form online. And as well, people can find me on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram as well. So people can get a taste of some of my videos. I'm posting short videos as I'm sort of moving around the region and talking to clients and in my own, the Outback Shack, sort of, doing the plumbing and getting the water fixed and all of just the daily reality of running a tourism business. It's not always glamorous and sometimes it's pretty funny too. So people can have a laugh at me trying to be a plumber, which I'm terrible at. So yeah, there's a couple of ways that people can get in touch. And then I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone's on LinkedIn and has a professional network, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to sign up. Through all of those channels, I'll be promoting that link. But yeah, fingers crossed. I'm in version 6 at the moment of the manuscript. So I've got a book coach. She's awesome. So, I'm outwardly accountable to her and hopefully we'll get it published around April. So Easter. Yeah, something will hatch at Easter.
That's great. So cvconsult.com.au is
right.
it? And again, you can sign up for the book to get notifications when the book's done. And just for anyone listening, I'm not a writer and I know how hard it is to write. I do my column every month and it's the bane of my existence. I can get it to 85% and then I'm definitely a man of the spoken word. But I know how hard it is to write a book, and I know how, for people who aren't going through big publishing houses, etc., it's tough to get it out there. I think this is a great resource for regional and especially rural Australia. So I'd encourage anyone that's thinking about it to please go and sign up, have a look at the book, try and support someone who's supporting the industry. It's a small job to do. And I just want to say thanks very much for today, Susan. I've learnt a lot. I think it's a great opportunity for the people in the ag space who want to do better. And one last question before we go, which I like to ask everyone. What's your definition of true wealth?
Oh, I think my definition of true wealth is, being happy, returning at the end of the day content, being content that you've given everything a shot. I often think about lying on my deathbed. I'm not going to be thinking about, gee, I wish I had more money, or gee, I'm going to be thinking about the stuff that I wish I had done. So I think for me, true wealth is about making sure that by the end of the day that you're content with your efforts and what you've done, and that you're happy with what you've done. You've done your very best and you can step back and you're happy with what you've got. More money it's not really the purpose. it's nice to have, it's exciting to get, but I think true wealth is when you can put yourself into your day and your relationships, and if you can make money out of being yourself and doing things that come naturally and authentically and doing stuff you love. I think you're very fortunate. You're truly wealthy.
Perfect. No, I love that. And it's interesting. People have probably heard me say this before, but I've had the privilege of dealing with a lot of people or successful people getting towards the end of their lives. And there's a couple of things that were really rang true with me from what they said. One was they always regretted what they didn't do, not what they did do. Number two, they wish they'd taken more risk. Mm-hmm. So they wish they'd taken those opportunities when they saw them and not sort of didn't do them. Number three was basically spending more time with family and friends. They were the three things that are really clear that I've seen over the years. And I think, if you're doing what you enjoy or you're putting in all you possibly can, that's got to be a great life. So look, Susan, thank you very much for that today. I've really appreciated it. As we said, everything's going to be in the show notes. And if anyone needs to reach out to you, if you've got questions, if you'd like to connect with Susan, show notes on LinkedIn. And look forward to reading the book.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been an absolute joy.